there have been, as I understand it, dozens of studies done all over the world that make it very clear that vaccines do not cause autism. Now, you just said, if I heard correctly, well, if the evidence is there. The evidence is there. That's it. Vaccines do not cause autism. Do you agree with that?
As I said, I'm not going to go into HHS with any preordained.
I asked you a simple question, Bobby. The studies all over the world say it does not. What do you think?
Senator, if you show me those studies, I will absolutely, as I promised to Chairman Cassidy, I will apologize.
That is a very troubling response because the studies are there. Your job was to have looked at those studies as an applicant for this job.
Thank you, Bernie.
Let me ask you another question about this one.
Yeah, that's another thing, too. It's always the stupidest people, the most like gullible, susceptible people who are like, well, I'll look at the evidence. You know, I do my research. I follow common sense, which is the opposite, but for some reason it's always the same people saying both of those things. I'll see what the research says. It's out there. It's out there. I've been dealing with this shit for 5 years with like debates on trans people, where like for ages the right was trying to convince, well, actually there's a scientific explanation for how transphobia is valid, and then you had people who were like, well, we actually need more evidence to prove that it's real and it helps people. And it's like, well, here's 50,000 studies. And of course, it didn't matter. They never cared. They were lying from the very beginning. When they said, you know, we need more evidence, people like Jesse Singal motherfuckers or whatever, they never actually believed that. They were lying from day one. They were just wasting time. They do that with autism. They do it with trans people. They do it with everything. Everything.
Scientists with the Yale School of Public Health and University of Maryland have estimated that the COVID vaccine saved 3 million lives and prevented 18 million hospitalizations. President Trump, someone who I do not often agree with, has said that the COVID vaccine was, quote, one of the greatest miracles of the ages. That's Donald Trump. But Bobby, you had a very different perspective. At a time when thousands of Americans were dying from COVID every week in May of 2021, you petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to revoke the emergency use of COVID vaccines. So my question to you is, were the scientists who told us that the COVID vaccine was imperative, and President Trump who told us that it was this great thing, were they right, or were you right when you told people that they should not take COVID shots?
Senator, I filed that lawsuit after CDC recommended the vaccine for 6-year-old children without any evidence that it would benefit them and without testing on 6-year-old children. And now
there was an active, ongoing pandemic. Would you like, oh, yeah, get the vaccines to everyone, but like hold off on waiting until we have studies on the long-term impact and efficacy of those vaccines on 6-year-olds. The question is, will it hurt the 6-year-olds? The answer is no. Who gives a fuck if they're vaccinated unnecessarily? It didn't hurt them. Like, what's the harm there? Oh no, you put a helmet on and the kid didn't fall off the bicycle, so the helmet was worthless.
That was my reason for filing that lawsuit.
Was the COVID vaccine successful in saving millions of lives?
I don't know. We don't have a good surveillance system, unfortunately.
We don't know?
I don't think anybody can say that. If you show me science that says that.
You know, Bobby, you say if I show you, you're applying for the job. I mean, clearly, you should know this. And that is, the scientific community has established that COVID vaccines save millions of lives, and you're casting doubt. That is really problematic. All right, let me ask you another question on
Keep them coming,
another
Bernie.
subject. My Republican colleagues and President Trump are moving toward making massive cuts into Medicaid in order to provide tax breaks for the wealthiest people in this country. As I'm sure you know, Medicaid provides health insurance to tens of millions of children, provides the funding for 2 out of every 3 seniors in nursing homes. It provides 43% of the revenue for community health centers, something I feel very strongly about. And it is so important for millions of people. If confirmed, in terms of making America healthy again, will you stand up to the White House and say, no, we cannot throw millions of children off of health care, millions of elderly people out of nursing homes. We cannot cut Medicaid to give tax breaks to billionaires.
President Trump has made no indication to me that he intends to throw millions of people out of nursing home or deprive people of their health care, Senator. We have a health care system that's broken. It's not working. You've been working on it your entire career. As Americans get less and less healthier, as premiums rose.
Bobby, I believe the healthcare system is broken. We
he
agree
has
on
asked
that.
me to fix it.
But
so
do you fix
for
it?
the American people.
But my colleagues here, certainly in the House of Representatives, are prepared to make massive cuts in Medicaid. Now, I happen to believe in a Medicare for all system that guarantees health care to all people. Not what we're talking about. But in fact, there is serious discussion of massive cuts to Medicaid, which will have devastating harm on children, people in nursing homes. All I am asking you, if that proposal goes through, will you say, hey, you're not keeping America healthy by throwing children off of health care?
Senator, I haven't seen any of the congressional proposals. I can only tell you what President Trump has told me, which is that he wants me to make Medicaid, Medicare, and Obamacare better.
Well, if you haven't seen those proposals, I suggest you go to any newspaper. They're there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Paul.
He's a coward. Yeah, well, of course, like, obviously, usually appointees play close to the vest when it comes to promises for future policy. But, like, yeah, obviously, he's not going to stand in the way of Trump cutting Medicaid. Yeah, so, there's no question there.
I think the discussion over vaccines
I only want to
is
hear
so
more from Bernie because I know they continue to
oversimplified
talk.
and dumbed down that we never really get to real truths, and it's why people up here are so separated from real people at home. So we talk about hepatitis B. It's a terrible disease. It could lead to liver failure, as the chairman said.
There
But
we go.
The reason you have distrust from people at home, why they don't believe anything you say, they don't believe government at all, is you're telling my kid to take a hepatitis B vaccine when he's 1 day old.
Schedule, and it says it's a study of 9-year-old boys, 47,000 9-year-old boys from the Florida healthcare data.
Okay, let me, Senator Sanders.
Thank you. And I find myself in the unusual and uncomfortable position of having to agree with.
I wonder why they'll blatantly lie, but then dance around certain issues and avoid deflect. It's mostly just about like what they can get away with the headlines, and what they'll be held accountable for later. Like, it's also, keep in mind, you're speaking to the committee, the public, and the oligarchs. When it comes to RFK Jr., if he says something like, yes, I promise I won't cut Medicaid, that would make a lot of people internally in the administration and the oligarchs angry because it could potentially be used as like a hypocrisy flag in the future. But if he says, of course, that he will, then that's publicly, politically unpopular with the public. It's just a matter of what they can get away with. They play the balancing game.
Senator Cassidy's line of questioning. Mr. Kennedy, in an interview in July 2023, you stated, quote, I do believe autism does come from vaccines. And you have, the end of quote, and you have praised a gentleman named Andrew Wakefield for his research. What studies, you talk about the need to be science-based, to get our information, good information to make decisions. What studies have you utilized to come to the conclusion that vaccines cause autism?
I'm happy to sit down with you.
No, please, just answer me that.
I mean, look at the Mawson study, Senator.
The what? Yeah.
Mawson, just look at that study.
Yeah, I will, and that was published.
But I don't want to, I wouldn't rest on a single study.
Right.
And all studies can be methodology.
Okay. Don't mean to be rude. I don't have a lot of time.
Just saying
you would not be, I just heard you say you could not be happier if you were proved wrong. Mr. Chairman, I asked to put into the record 16 studies done by scientists and doctors all over the world saying that vaccines do not cause autism.
They're biased.
Are you happy?
He'd have to look at it.
Look at the IOM assessment of those 16 studies.
Yeah, he'd have to look at it.
The IOM has assessed them. But listen,
He's only talked about the subject like thousands of times and made money from lying about it, and is also about to be the director of Health and Human Services, but he hasn't seen those massive, well-funded studies on the subject. He'd have to look at it. You know, trust me, he'll look at it any day now. He'll look at it, and then his opinion will adjust to follow the evidence that he's very concerned with.
Let me get to it. Don't have a lot of time. I apologize. I'm happy to talk to you at another time. Don't have a lot of time. Let's talk about COVID. And I just want clarity on the issue. And again, I apologize. You have to be brief. We don't have a lot of time. Scientists have estimated that the COVID vaccine saved 3 million lives. President Trump said the COVID vaccine was, quote, one of the great miracles of the ages, end quote. You have said the COVID vaccine was the deadliest vaccine ever made, end of quote. Was the COVID vaccine the deadliest vaccine ever made?
the reason I said that, Senator Sanders, is because there were more reports on the VAERS system, on the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which is the only surveillance system, that and VSafe. And there were more reports of injuries and deaths than all other vaccines combined.
But was it the scientists said it saved 3 million?
VAERS reports are not reliable. They deliberately made them unreliable by convincing every person who votes Republican in this country that every negative feeling they got after the COVID vaccine, including the feelings they got from COVID, was from the COVID vaccine. There were people posting like, oh, my uncle died after getting the vaccine. He died from being a stupid fat ass. Like, it's completely worthless. It's good for analyzing trends and data, but they made the system worthless by lying in their reports, by attributing everything after the vaccine to the vaccine. It made it impossible. Public health is impossible now.
I don't know, because we don't have a good surveillance system. So
you disagree with the scientific community that...
Oh, I'm agnostic because we don't have the science to make that determination.
He doesn't have to say, he just doesn't know. He doesn't know the science. He does know the VAERS self-reporting system that was heavily gamed by right-wing influence, you know? He doesn't know.
Prescription drug prices in America, as you know.
And by the way, I think President Trump did an extraordinary job on Warp Speed, because he wasn't just focusing on that one intervention. He was focusing on...
He called it a miracle, but you have cast doubts on its efficacy. All right. Prescription drugs. We're going to make America healthy. I agree with you that we need a revolution in the nature of food in America, physical exercise, etc. Very, very important. But there are people who are going to get sick, and they have to go to the doctor and find out why. 1 out of 4 Americans today cannot afford the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe, because we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We made some progress under the Biden administration of negotiating prescription drug prices with pharma. First time that's ever happened. Now, yesterday you told me that the White House was going to issue something affirming their support for continuing those Medicare negotiations. Turned out not to be quite accurate. They came up with some bland statement, could have been written by pharma. Very specific questions. Do you believe and will you insist that Medicare continue to negotiate prices with the pharmaceutical industry so we can substantially lower prescription drug costs in America?
President Trump has made it very clear to me that he wants to negotiate prices.
Negotiate is a big word, Bobby. It's a big word.
It's the word you just used, Senator.
Yeah, but no, I use defend a particular law. Will you defend the law in the Inflation Reduction Act, which already is negotiating prescription drug prices?
President Trump wants us to negotiate drug prices. He wants to lower drug prices.
So you're not telling me that you will defend the law that we passed, which has already had significant success? Well,
the Congress, look, I'm going to comply with the law, Senator. Congress passed the law. I'm swearing an oath to the Constitution. I'm going to comply with the laws.
You're going to have a significant influence on health care policy if you are.
And I'm going to comply with the laws.
Let me just say this in conclusion, Chairman Cassidy. President Trump and Mr. Kennedy are quite right when they say that our system is broken. They're right. Our economic system today is broken. 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Wages have been stagnant for American workers for 50 years. The economy is broken. You know what? Our political system is broken and corrupt. You have a handful of billionaires in both political parties who contribute huge amounts of money to elect
Careful,
candidates
Bernie.
in this room, throughout the United States.
They're lining up
Congress.
their sites as you
That
speak.
is a broken political system and a real threat to democracy. Our healthcare system is broken. And it's broken for some of the reasons that Mr. Kennedy indicated. We have not paid attention to the fact that we have massive amounts of chronic disease. We have not answered the question why in the richest country in the history of the world, our life expectancy is lower than it is in countries far poorer than we are. So I think in many ways, President Trump and Mr. Kennedy have asked some of the right questions. Problem is their answers will only make a bad situation worse. So let me ask Mr. Kennedy again. If we want to make America healthy, will you assure the American people that you will fight to do what every other major country on earth does, guarantee health care to every single American?
Probably not.
I'm going to make America healthier than other countries in the world right now.
Will
we're
you
the sickest.
guarantee do what every other major country does? That's a simple question. Bob.
And by the way, Bernie, the problem of corruption is not just in the federal agencies; it's in Congress too. Almost all the
Oh,
members
I think I saw this bit. Some of the worst accounts on Twitter were like, yeah, he got his ass.
of this panel are accepting, including yourself, are accepting millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry
Oh,
and protecting their interests.
Oh, I thought that would come. No. I ran for president like you. I got millions
I know.
and millions of contributions. They did not come from the executives, not one nickel of PAC money from the pharmaceutical industry. They came from workers.
In 2020, you were the single largest
Because I had
receiver of
small
pharmaceutical money.
contributions from workers all over this country. Workers,
You were the
missed
single-
not a nickel from corporate
Bernie, you were
PACs.
the single largest acceptor of
workers-
pharmaceutical dollars.
No, from workers in the industry.
1.5 million.
Yeah, out of 200 million. All right, but you have not answered. Last question. You have
Notice how defensive RFK Jr. got here, how desperate he is to pull things away from Medicare for all. You're literally seeing like socialism or barbarism. Liberals take note. Like you have a very clear fork in the road here where, because obviously RFK Jr. will not make America healthy again. He won't do anything to challenge corporate power. We all know this. It's obvious. Whereas Bernie Sanders would have and genuinely believes in, like, supports an ideology that would have made things better had we only taken the good timeline, you know? So RFK Jr. doesn't just, like, do the standard duck and weave. RFK Jr. is like, well, actually, you're corrupt too because you accepted money. And of course, he's lying. Bernie didn't take money from PACs, nor would PACs want to give him money because he doesn't support their interests, which is based. It's just like, it's a good reminder that fascists find socialism threatening as an ideology, not only because it disagrees with them, but because it offers a better answer than them. Does that make sense? It's not just, RFK isn't just rejecting the premise of the question. He's trying to rebel against the perceived moral superiority that Bernie Sanders holds over him, which it's a defensive response. It's an acknowledgement from him that Bernie Sanders is the actual path to health and to betterment for the working class, which is why he acted the way that he did.
answer my question.
Mr.
How the
Chairman,
heck
we're
do
3
we make
minutes.
Ask you a
America?
question.
How do we
We're-
make
he is-
America
Miss-
healthy if you don't guarantee health
Chairman,
care
we're
to all
literally
people?
3 minutes over here now.
Well, so are other
How long
people.
does it keep going? At some time, you're just battering the witness,
Not
Bernie.
battering the witnesses. I'm
Yes,
trying
you
to get
are.
an
And
answer.
you're getting upset at him. You're going at him just like anybody else would.
We'll come to order. Bernie's going over. Before I ever entered politics, before I was ever thinking about running for office, I practiced medicine for 30 years. I worked in public hospitals.
Now, honestly, I don't really care that much following up on Bernie Sanders. Wait, does he speak again? Bernie, you're so active.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for your job today in conducting this very, very important hearing.
Find me Biden speaking for this long,
Let me
anytime
reiterate
during his presidency.
my concerns.
State of the Union address. Shut up.
Every person on this panel, and I would hope everybody in America, wants to make us the healthiest country on earth. And I applaud Mr. Kennedy for raising the issues and talking about some very important truths. But what I am not hearing from him are some very specific policy issues that we absolutely need if we're going to make America healthy. It is unquestionable that when 68,000 Americans die because they can't afford to go to a doctor, you got to deal with that. And I have not heard one word about the need for universal health care that exists in every country on earth. When 1 out of 4 people can't afford prescription drugs because the pharmaceutical industry is ripping us off and charging us 10 times more in some cases than the people in other countries. I have not heard the definitive answer I need that we're not going to pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And one of the points I think that
It's going to be so cool when I'm 70 years old and people are going to be posting like grainy VHS edits of Sanders at 85 talking in settings like this, and people are going to be like, why didn't we listen? Or they're going to be so overwhelmed with decades of fascist corporate propaganda that they're going to like, oh wow, he was ahead of his time or something, as though this wasn't an actual debate for a time. You know what I mean?
Kennedy made, which is right. Healthcare is not just medical care. It's a lot more. Talk about the food industry. We have held a hearing. Senator Cassidy and I held a hearing a couple of months ago where we made the point that the food industry is, in fact,
Grandpa, why didn't you guys vote for
poisoning
Bernie
our
Sanders?
kids with addictive food that is leading to obesity, diabetes, heart conditions, etc. And I hope that our Congress and the White House will have the courage to take on a very powerful food industry and demand that the products that they sell our kids are in fact healthy and non-addictive. In many ways, what the food industry is doing today is what the tobacco industry did 50 or 60 years ago. And we talk about making America healthy today. Again, it's not just doctor care, medical care. We have millions of people working for starvation wages. You cannot be healthy if you're working 50 or 60 hours a week and you can't afford the rent that your landlord is charging you. Stress kills. Stress makes us sick. So, Mr. Chairman, let me just say this. I think the issues that have been raised in this hearing today are of enormous importance. I look forward to working with you and other members of this committee to make sure that we develop the policies that have the courage to take on very powerful and wealthy special interests. So, in fact, that we can make America healthy. Thank you.
This concludes our hearing. For any senators who wish to ask additional questions, questions for the record will be due tomorrow on Friday, January 31st at 5 p.m.
Do you think the other members of Congress genuinely hate Bernie Sanders? A lot of them. And I imagine a lot of the Democrats probably think of him as like a naive activist who's held on to power for a long time. Like, who doesn't understand how it really works, man. Like, wow, it's so cool how he gets to float the system, not take money from PACs, and not have to hold meetings with lobbyists over and over and over and over again. That's cool that he gets to live out there in fantasy world where he gets repeatedly elected. But over here in like the real world, if he had won the presidency, he would understand. They're all like cynical hypocrites who like took the bribe every time, and they probably hate him for it because he shows them that there was a better way that they just didn't take. How much news / what type of news is a healthy amount / type to consume? Absolutely none. Right now, the healthiest amount of news to consume is 0. Like Bernie said, stress is bad for you.